Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. So I was picking up my Death Guard new releases from my friendly local gaming store and I saw this, the Lieutenant Titus commemorative model, just sat there ready to be bought. I love the Space Marine games and I thought, why not, couldn't resist. I'll add him to my ultramarine kill team for a bit of fun. Comes with a little transfer sheet, very small booklet for the kind of build instructions, and it is a single sprue model. Now when I first got the sprue I thought, oh fantastic, look at this, we've got some moulded on ultramarine symbology onto the backpack, there's some moulded stuff on the knees, there's a different chest eagle with an ultramarine symbol. I thought, oh, they seem to be doing it right here. But then the first problem started. Why a blank shoulder pad? Seems to make no sense. That wouldn't have been much more of a sculpting step, wouldn't be any more plastic on the model. It would save them having to put a transfer sheet in there and would certainly save the kind of hobbyist time. I don't understand that. And that starts a couple of things about the model that I don't quite understand. Second part, one of the final pieces you build is the holster with an armor panel that you put on. And look, scale is a problem in 40k, we know this, but on a single model, why not make the holster fit the gun? It's a little bit odd. This will be a centerpiece model for a lot of people, and I imagine there'll be a lot of people that will buy this model that don't do ultramarines. Kind of like myself, I know I've got a few, but I generally don't do ultramarines. But this could be something you buy because you love the game. So why not make the scale fit? Even if it meant scaling down his pistol, because when you look at the game, obviously, this pistol is not this big in his hand in the game, so a little bit of an odd choice. And I suppose that's the thing about this model, it is Primaris Lieutenant, but it's possibly one of the worst you could pick for a number of reasons. First of all, it's ultramarines. If you don't draw ultramarines, you'll have a lot of work taking the symbols off, which again, don't understand why I didn't have it on the shoulder. So I've done the base and I am drilling my barrels. You don't have to drill your barrels, but I do think it adds a level of immersion that I think it's worth the extra kind of 30 seconds to a minute of a step. Now I've sprayed the model black and I've sprayed it with Games Workshop Lead Belcher spray, which is the best base coat I believe for the vast majority of 40k models, especially if they're wearing armour. Go on to that why later. Now Retributor armour is kind of a lovely brass colour, so we're doing that on the ultramarine specific chest eagle and also a lot of the trim around the model, and this is when you realise there's a good level of moulded on detail. Again, a lot of it very ultramarine specific, but it's not over the top like a lot of Primaris Lieutenants are. A lot of them can be really, really detailed. There are some plain ones, but it's not kind of, an over the top scheme. Now, this is where the Lead Belcher base spray comes into its own when you're doing battle damage and armour. So we're working on the McCrag Blue. I use all my paints apart from metallics off a wet palette. So the paint's been watered down slightly. So we're putting thin coats on. But when I'm doing the armour here, I'm paying attention to kind of get into the corners and cover the vast majority of the armour, but not all of it. So where there's sections where there might be wear or a bit of battle damage, especially on a chest here where they've literally got a moulded in bullet impact, I'm not putting that blue on the impact, the damage. I'm leaving that Lead Belcher section showing through, and this is massively time saving when you're doing sort of battle damage armour, having it as a base coat like that rather than a black base coat. So you're not having to do that armour, which I think is, for me, fantastic. Now onto the undersized leather pouch, just painting the brown around there. You could do pouches in any colour that you've done the rest of your army, obviously. This is just how the box art comes, this is what the model in the game was like, but leather onto his pouch. The basing I'm doing very similar to my demon basing for my Nurgle demon army, which you've seen recently. So just working on a grey colour onto the stone. Now I do accidentally paint over the back of a skull because I didn't realise it was the back of a skull when I was painting it. If you make mistakes like that when you go in, don't worry about it. You can correct it later. Now moving on to the bone white, painting the bones in his little reliquary. Is that the word, or is it ossuary? One or the other. There's various words for bones in a pot, and that's kind of what he's got on his front there. Also putting this bone white colour onto his tabard and onto the bottom of the purity seal you can see here. Now in the case of the purity seal, it's going to stay bone white because it kind of works for a kind of dirty paper colour later on, but we're going to go back and do something different with the tabard in a bit. Now onto that skull we saw there, so this is the front of the skull that I painted over the back. Again, the bone white across all of those, and I have used skulls from the skull set onto the base, as you'll see there. Now the stripe on his helmet, I've already done the bone white stripe, going back over with an off-white now. So it gives a slight subtle highlight layer, and I don't actually use pure white on this model at all, but it does look pure white on the camera because it's just different enough from the bone white to make it stand out. Now stripes on the helmet, use a thin brush, literally put the brush in the middle of where you want the stripe to build, and as the brush splays out it will obviously widen that stripe. Moving on to the red and using a super fine brush here to put that red stripe down the middle of the white. Now painting stripes in a line is not easy, and it's not something that I'm particularly brilliant at, but practice. If you need to practice, you know, before you go into a live model, put a spare head on a stick, because you're bound to have some spare parts from somewhere, and just have a go at doing it. You will only get better at doing this kind of thing as you practice. I avoid doing it very often, but I've done it enough times over the years that I can just have a good go at it. Now, because we're doing a battle damaged model, that's going to help, because you can cover it up with battle damage if you make mistakes. Now, red into the eye lenses, again, using a small brush, matching what is on the box art and on the actual game model. Now, I didn't use the bear head, which I could have done, because I wanted the helmet. I wanted to just paint a stripe down the middle, do something a little bit different. And I also wanted to keep the Titus head that you get in the model, the bear head, for use in a nerdle conversion later on, because why not? Now, taking the Retributor armour colour onto the tabard and doing a very thin line down this middle of the tabard, or the bottom of the tabard rather, to pull him into his company colours, which I think is second company. Titus' second company, isn't he? I think, whatever, should know that. It's terrible if I don't, but I think I've got that one right. And it highlights another thing with it. His bolt pistol holster is on his left-hand side, but the gun's in his right-hand side, and all the way through the game, the holster's on the right-hand side as well. There's just mistakes on this model that I don't understand why they did them. Onto the base with the Beastie Brown, again, like I've said already, matching it into my Demon Army. I could have matched it into the Kill Team, but the Kill Team models that I did, the Ultramarines, come with moulded bases, so I thought matching with the Demons kind of fits quite well, and I really like actually the range of Plague War books that they did where the Ultramarines are facing off with the Demons. It's kind of fitting in that sense as well. Now, I use a bad and black to edge of the bases. Some people, you know, match the edge of the base to the top of the base, and you might do it brown, whatever. I've always just done mine black, just an easy piece there. And onto the gun casings and the casing of the chainsword, doing again in that bad and black. And that's a strange thing I've noticed over the years. Ultramarines used to have sort of very vibrant red gun casings, and they've definitely moved across to doing that black, maybe a little bit more grimdark and bringing it in. Now, a little bit of detail, and I vary between whether I do this on models or not, but it's taking a very thin brush, using that bad and black, and literally just kind of etching on some words and symbols so it looks a bit like there's actual writing kind of on there. Now, onto the transfer stage, using a very old manky brush to just put some Vallejo hand-painted gloss varnish onto the shoulder pad, and that will help the transfer grip. When that is dry, taking Vallejo decal fix, which basically is like an extra glue layer that's going to go on and hold that decal on that a little bit stronger. Now, these are brand new decals I'm going to use on, so you probably don't need to do these stages, but I do think it just adds a little bit of extra detail that will help when you're doing your model. Now, slicing out the transfers, this one about cost. Why give you a transfer sheet like this when you could have just moulded on an Ultramarine symbol and saved everybody a load of time? Slicing out the decal and then putting some little bits of battle damage in, so putting some nicks and scratches into that decal, so when it goes on the model, it's not just the only piece on him that's pristine, because there is a bit of battle damage on him, so it makes sense that the transfer is going to be battle damage as well. Now, sliding it on so it's been soaked in water for sort of 30 seconds to a minute, using a brush just to slide it onto there. Don't use your brand new perfect brushes, because again, you're going to get a bit of that decal fix onto the end of the brush. It can be cleaned off though, but just use an older one. And when I did it, what I would recommend, before you put it onto the shoulder, take a knife and put a little sort of nick in between the Ultramarine symbol there, because it'll help it fold around the shoulder. Now, I didn't do that, and it was having difficulty folding. Did it on the model, didn't cause any damage, but I would do it off the model sort of in future. And then you're fixing it and working it round to push out the air bubbles and that transfer. Now, as a final stage, what I also do is another Vallejo product, which is the Vallejo decal softener, and that just melts the decal a little bit and gets rid of bubbles. Probably unnecessary on a brand new transfer on a nice model with no kind of lumps and bumps, but it's just something I've always done. There's other products out there. Now, when it's completely thoroughly dry, doing a wash layer. So this is Games Workshop Seraphim Sepia, and we're putting this all over the model. Now, this is where the kind of lead belcher base coat we've done sort of comes into its own. So already we've saved loads of time by not putting any work into the metal. So I haven't used any kind of metal colour, no gunmetal, no bolt gun metal, whatever the colours are nowadays, just working off lead belcher. This wash will dirty up that metal, make it look slightly battle worn and rusty. So the Games Workshop Seraphim Sepia is nowhere near as dark and severe as the Vallejo Seraphim Sepia that you will have seen me use if you've watched my channel a lot. That is a really, really dirty, mucky wash. The Games Workshop one just knocks it down a level, makes them a little bit battle worn, but doesn't go too far. But what it does enable you to do, and what you're seeing here, is use the exact same colours we've already used to then bring the sort of colours up by doing some edge highlighting. So I'm taking the exact same colours we've already done and literally using the very end of the brush, not a lot of paint, and painting it onto the very raised areas where the well, the edges are, and the sunlight is going to hit, etc., because it adds an extra colour. So even though it's the same colour we've already used, because that Seraphim Sepia has just knocked the colours down a bit and dirtied them up, this makes it look like you've taken a whole lot of paint and done a highlight layer. Now here I managed to mess up the red stripe, not on camera, and go slightly to the side. You can see there it's kind of filled in that white area, unfortunately. So just taking the off-white colour again and tidying up the mistakes. You can always tidy mistakes up, and like I said earlier, if you're going to do stripes and things, practice it on some black models. Now really onto the very final details here. Before I finish off, I will do Munitor and varnish, because it is going to be a gaming piece, this, potentially, or I might get rid of it, or it might just sit in a cabinet for the next 10 years. Don't know, but it was a bit of fun to do this model, and that is the scheme finished. Fairly quick scheme. I kind of got mixed feelings about this model. I think it's a bit of a boring kind of Primaris Lieutenant. It kind of fits the game but kind of doesn't, but it was a bit of fun to paint it, and it's always nice to have a whinge every now and then. So if you've enjoyed that, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again.